Good evening, everybody. My name is Anna Leahy, and I direct the MFA program at Chapman University and also Tabula Poetica, the Center for Poetry at Chapman University. Welcome to the Tabula Poetica reading series. This fall, we are hosting all our events entirely online. We are live streaming now on YouTube, and they will add closed captions after the event, and the videos will be stored there. You can see past videos of Tabula Poetica talks and readings there as well. We encourage you to follow Tab Journal on Facebook and on Twitter. We're excited to invite poetry readers from everywhere, all over the world, into this fall's Tabula Poetica conversation. In addition, we've invited students in classes reading the work of the visiting poets to participate via Zoom. We ask that students keep their microphones muted while the poet is speaking, and then for Q&A, students can put the questions in the chat. Our next, excuse me, our next Tabula Poetica date is November 9th, and then we finish up on December 14th with a reading by Chapman University's own poets. So mark your calendars for November 9th and December 14th. Genevieve Kaplan is our guest curator for this year's series. She has done a fantastic job, and I'm grateful to her for bringing these particular poets to be part of our ongoing conversation about all things poetry. Most of the support for this series and for Tab Journal comes from the English department. I especially want to thank our department chair, Joanna Levin, who I think is watching on YouTube, and our administrative assistants, Kristen Laxo, and especially Samantha Della-O, and graduate assistant, Jason Thornberry. And if we could just give a little clap for Samantha. She is the person behind the scenes who has worked out all the technology for the series this fall. This year, Tabula Poetica also received grants from poets and writers to support the visiting poets. And before we go on, I just want to hold up the book. So this is the Visiting Poets book. It's called All Things Lose Thousands of Times, and it's from Inlandia Books. And I encourage you, if you have not purchased the book already, to go to bookshop.org and get this book right away. For those of you in the Zoom, I know that many of you have read the book, and so we're looking forward to hearing your questions. Make sure you put those in the chat. I am now going to turn this over to Genevieve Kaplan, our guest curator.
Hi, I am delighted to introduce Angela Peñaredondo, who is here with us tonight as part of our Fall 2020 Tabula Poetica series. Angela Peñaredondo is the author of All Things Lose Thousands of Times. Get it? Yes. It's the winner of the Hilary Gravendike Prize and was published by the Inlandia Institute. She's also the author of a chapbook, Maroon. Peñaredondo's work has appeared in the Academy of American Poets, Black Warrior Review, Thrush, and Southern Humanities Review, among other places. They have received fellowships from Kundiman, the Voices of Our Nation's Art Foundation, and the Makonda Writers Workshop. Peñaredondo works as an assistant professor of creative writing and digital humanities at Cal State San Bernardino. Angela's poems and other creative pieces are consistently bold and compelling. Their work takes us on unexpected journeys through time and space, sound and motion. In our class discussions about All Things Lose Thousands of Times, students noted themes of transformation and identity. We compared the poem's complex structures to jazz or abstract art. We noted a keen attention to choices in poetic presentation, to lyric, and to music. Angela's incorporation of pop culture and historical references allowed the poems we read to resonate beyond our own personal spaces. And earlier today at her craft talk, Angela shared and discussed their work with sound collage and collaboration, creating reciprocal relationships between sound and text, and critiquing the culture of silence. All of which makes me that much more excited to see where tonight's poems take us. Please join me in welcoming Angela Peñaredondo.
Thank you so much, Genevieve, for that. And thank you for inviting me to be part of Tableau reading series. And just, I've known Genevieve for some time and I really appreciate her and her work and just her always supporting so many talented and just really strong and radiant writers and poets and all that. And so it's always an honor to be here with her. And also, thank you so much to Anna and Samantha for also inviting me here and supporting me, and also uplifting queer Filipinx voices in literature. So I'm going to read some pieces from All Things Lose Thousands of Times, even though there are moments it does feel like the work, although still a part of me, feels like many years have passed, and it seems like days and nights here just speed faster than usual. So it just feels like it's such a long time ago, but it's a pleasure to read them here with you. And so I'll be reading some from there. And I'll be reading also new pieces from my new manuscript. And hopefully that will give you an idea of where I'm headed um, in the near future and currently. Okay, so I wanted to start with Women and Children for Sale. And um, this is an interesting piece for me because, well, all the pieces in this book was incredibly personal, but this one especially, and it was definitely formed during a lot of my times traveling and and being exposed to the ways in which a kind of global tourism um, impacted not only my country. I was born in the Philippines, but other countries, and so and and anyways, just sort of my ruminations on global tourism and also colonialism at the same time. But I'll go ahead and start. I'll leave it at that. um, so, Women and Children for Sale. One, so young, like silk heaven, light pulls my bamboo, hard ahs and oohs for this sweet potato. Forget her and the yellow shutters, bicycle swarm, they're coming. Two, broiled fish Asian landscape, where mercenaries first hoisted their grandiose operas, tossed their nets out for translucent shrimp, jet a marriage, carry her to bed, calmly jaywalk with confidence. Three, the domestic market. He's paying all before 1,000 selected queens saddled behind glass and stage. They're wearing the tightest lace and blue jeans. Miss, this is something. Obsession, a little job abroad. Four, they shake, smoldering before gilded midnight. They come primed for explosion. One applauds, frozen faced, at France Bar and Alaminos. Her name, Kareen. Five, before we go any further, let me tell you why I seek struggle. A little noodle soup and rice liquor, the debris of a giant firecracker, to plunge from a butterfly of a boat on golden waters. Six, good morning, hello, America, hello. I boil the classics, roast with plum sauce and the fiercest ginger. I eat Gone with the Wind. Scarlet exists in the Bay of Tonkin. It was difficult to get a visa. Seven, demon faith carries a girl over fields, over Red River, pagodas in full smoke, altars never wonder, flowers, flower balloons arrive, from the village interspersed in small powder loads, eyes alive. Eight, if you go out early good looking, the damp winds bear the image half a world away, arranged before children were beaten. We're in the tropics, above sea level, at the latitude of Calcutta, Indochina, bombs, farms, annexations, the northern border flouts. They suggest that I don't need a translator. 9. Take the train across Cambodia, very rich people, good food, basket on strings, bikinis front row, Mandarin robes, blue bodhisattvas, gold, more children. I ask a young man, care how they look? Looks chaotic, but paved over, they're gone without a trace. 10. Go away, crackling fry of beef, butchering of 2 dogs for the pot of love, been bone hungry 3 days, another waxes, and I can hardly move, private resistance of the bloodstream. 11. An inscription on a drum, water buffalo and pig, a dragon inside me, wherever I go. And I noticed I added the me in there. Okay. So I'm reading from my screen right now. So I usually like reading from the actual book, but I don't have it in front of me. So apologies if I'm just staring at you, it's because I'm scrolling. Okay. So this next piece is What She Wills, the Trees Behind. And this piece was at that moment dedicated to my grandmother who passed away, but also um, there were a lot of typhoons happening at that time, or they seem to always happen, especially in countries that are geologically islands. And so this was sort of came from that, sort of like during the death of my grandmother and this time of grief, and a time when there always seems to be some kind of typhoon or like monsoon or something, or a big tidal wave, but this is kind of about that, or came from that. What she wills, the trees behind. With all the danger involved, at least you know the missing is not a blank letter or diminished garden. Instead, your mouth full of such shattering sea, and the peninsula's ravaged like the lean flesh of a neck. How many times, barefoot and without map, you must have told God through the slim crevice of both palms, you were ready to let go of all that water. The wax-like geography of a province, and grandmother finally buried in Laguna, its quiet shrine as close to infinity as a small planet gleaming. Each summer you take what little money to escape, eager for the pulpy bits of yourself moving, no longer cut in half, but some bandaged organism with each opening of dark and easy compartment, without clinging rope or barricade, not an exotic brand or objet trouvé or long sans dancers, rather from clouds and animal forms, a wild cat slipping inside an oblong hole. You think of the different countries now washed over by rain. Very well, they tell you under fractions of sky, because they've watched all things lose thousands and thousands of times. And the next piece I'm going to read, I just want to check my time. This is titled Women Eats Milkfish and Hibiscus. And yeah, I think I'll just read it. However, if someone remembers the name, which I always forget, of the Portishead song that's in that's in this poem, type it in the chat box. Okay. Women eats milkfish and hibiscus. Long silvered fatness she picks out from 200 bones, a dream of culling feathers from a bird wing. This hunger for the galactic, camouflage within the leather of tamarind trees. This must be her last dinner with the mga tuko lizards, with the Visayan islets rusting and breathing, where seawater meets corrugated metal. In the hut next door, someone's twitchy sanyo purrs. Across a garden of bitter melon, the radio, move over and give us some room. Through humid foliage, ghosts never lose their want for good crooning, no matter the fissions or diodes. Among the reptile's cockle jaws, she's a hideaway girl. And with her too, they wait with their jellied feelers wriggling to corners of a porch like unfettered dress straps. She sponge bathes white fish in cane sugar until it umbers, salts some more before the declaration of tongue. When all the flesh is swallowed, save the flowers for last. Okay. And I'm going to read this poem next because there was a slight, maybe an indirect, what is it? Request is what I was going to say. Okay, so let me scroll and find it. Okay, here we go. This is why I need a goddess. I love those dead-eyed winos picking up empties, their laughter a firework. The city is full and nuts, but I can't hear its usual neon thrum of its barges. No, it's quiet and the devil blinks, imagines small, invisible things. Tonight hurts, fights, drops, sleeps. It's 3 a.m., the Atlantic midnight for a poet. Come on, cruel finger, with your cruel and refusing shake. Come to me, finger, and not the bottle. Go paint the bulge on this white page. Write about hell, factories, and cemeteries, how they dance blurry pieces of flame. But instead, you give me the sea, my feet. You throw love out like an old sack, a loaded mouth grinning, a downer for dead, and night's ripenness inching towards wreckage. See, he's got you too. Finger, fix it and make it right. Like a seeing eye dog, the Lord will see you good. And let's see here. This is advice for tumbling out of a racing car. And it was inspired by, I think it was inspired by Rebel Without a Cause initially, but then I saw this film, I believe it was called The Exiles. It was a black and white film that was on, that was actually about Los Angeles. And it was really wonderful because it showed all these different types of folks that were living in Los Angeles before it became, you know, the Los Angeles we know today. And it was just, for me, it was just really amazing to see like all these folks, like all these, well, there, you know, it showed Los Angeles, you know, it was very immigrant. It was also really native, and it was so great to see all these folks like in these like cars, these cars with their tops down, and very cool, you know, leather dance halls, hair greased back, and I thought, yes, this is good. I love to see the brown bodies like this, brown bodies like myself in this kind of space and history, and that they exist. So this is for that time in history. And so advice for tumbling out of a racing car. 1, give an offering of smoke to the clavicle, the double-sided arrow of the body. It will tell you which way to swerve. 2, choose a thunderbird for its 3 red eyes. 3, attack like a hawk or guinea fowl. Your opponent, only dove. 4, before flight, be prepared to roll the torso into an isopod. 5, tuck chin into chest. You will not swallow dirt, swallow yourself. 6, you're a stunt woman. Code name, Elastique Sauvage. 7, beauty, not an option. 8, remember the heart is a miniature bombardier. 9, do not mistake your legs for bayonets. Use them as catapults. 10, you must and shall be an expert in hinging. 11, blood will be the first and last thing you see. 12, in this game of chicken, heaven comes after collision. I'm going to read a few pieces now from the new manuscript that I've been working on and shopping around. And this is some of these poems, they're just a bunch of sections. A lot of them are in prose and in fragments. And this section of the book is titled To Hold These Contradictions in Kinship. And I'll just, let me see, I'm gonna close this and I'm gonna see if I can make my screen bigger. So I'm just gonna kind of keep going, and maybe I'll do a signal. I'll do like this as a signal. I don't know, this. I'll do some kind of signal with my hands, maybe this. And that means that I'm moving into a next section. So I'm gonna start with a quote. And it's, quote, one important way that power elites seek to disrupt the sense of historical identity of those they want to dominate is by taking over the transmission of culture to the young. By Aurora Levins Morales, the historians as curandera. Or, observe a pattern in the flood. Stretch out like a shirt before you rip. Indicate one way you've lost loyalty to yourself. Learn multiple forms of femme audacity. Feel important and wanted without others. Float rather than become stone. Hollow a small patch of earth as if it were the moon. Build vocabulary that sears where the sap has flowed. Abandon all those pretty things. For every correct answer, peel another layer like sunlight. Allow each part to drift and return in any order or fashion, but return. Forming an arrowhead, ibises carry each other in flight, the direction of what I want to read as a glyph of hope. I walk east, a parking lot almost burns, the dusk lukewarm to blush. Then I'm back again on the balcony of my university building 6.5 years ago before we met. Wind transporting brush sediments towards an approaching summer. Those jacarandas and tolerant native vines, long auspicious walks on hot nights with a tuxedo cat seducing us, rolls her ass in dirt. Under the sky, I nurse a kindling. You feel gone more than ever. Your shoulder turns over into another bed. Shadow lean into my neck like an ink spill, reminding me of those ibises and how I should proceed. In absence, I despise what you've become, what you've always been, a secret set loose at this body who prays for your reckoning. And this piece is titled Amulet for a Changing Child. Hazel animal brushing up my shins, swathing the earth floor. In shadow, your sneakers want to squish the bug bodies of scatological symbolism. Who wrote and called us pygmies of the Pacific archipelago? They've written too many cockroach epistemologies. Where's the industrial flypaper to catch all the rodents hiding underneath pipes and dirty money? Oh, I hope this bane has made a wild tribe whore out of my blood. Such tactics, oh, satirical portrait, barbaric camp, O police, proximity perversions have been made. My people will eat your celestial placenta, as Remedios Varos wrote in her dream letter. We shall eat on lush leaves, molding your pale meat into lump sums. And this piece is called Mercy. And I believe I'll be reading just a few more. So, Mercy. I'm slaying you in my dreams. No, I'm slaying you for reals this time. Steel pointed and aimed like a hawk bone at your bare clavicle. Your eyes are saying that age-old question that you stripped away from my people thousands of years ago. Why? And there's nothing holding me back from carving your body as one does when whittling wood into a child's toy. There's nothing holding me back from this blade carving my name on your skin, the name the ocean gave when took me during my formative years, name she gave me when she revealed the dead of her underbelly, all cinematic between poisonous stars, ancestral organs, monstrous and indigo. Those once privileged limbs of yours, that mouth of yours which consumed everything it could because it believed it could without even knowing it could. Now I bind your body lying in the sand of the black shores of my birth. I roll you up into a cigar until all of you is covered in lava sediment. Then I set your weight on a raft just made for you, tied up, framed, burned the guava leaves in ceremony above each part of you covered in volcanic ash. I hover longer over your bandaged eyes, over wrinkled genitals, a pod now waiting to be returned back to the earth. I breathe out smoke into your one naked ear so you can hear my life force one last time burn like tundra, the monsoon, or wandering stars colliding into celestial violence before I push you off wrath, smoke, ember, self into what was destined to consume you. Okay, so I will read some, I think these are, I want them to be short. So this is from, again, a few things written in sections. And this is from The Dead, the section that is titled The Dead Teach the Living. So first section. Colonized people, their bronze bodies, pistols rising from them like flaring buckeye. Not fit to be held in these hands, she wrote down on her knees and ankles. An owl shapeshifts into a large, square-faced dog, mahogany legs, half chewed in battle by another dog. She did not, she wrote to feel captive. She wrote not to feel captive anymore, a transparent medium, a dewy spectacle in the canon. She wrote which is equivalent to death. She heard floral speak, but she soon found it was birds playing in the madrone. He runs through silt and its rhizomes, through sacramental mounds, until feet, breasts, arteries, and joints unfix and feather. He runs into the future. His throat carries 3,700 seed capsules, which will regurgitate to mush, feeding the outstretched mouths of hungry fledglings. And this will be my last piece. And actually, I'm trying to figure out which one I want to read, but I think I'll just read this one because it happens to be already here. This one is titled Meditations on a Fist, and it's in 3 parts. The first part is grandfather. A clenched foot is to a body object that strikes with fists around a wooden rod or slippery metal that pushed heavy hooves through a field's shallow rainwater. I grew around acres of mud, and the seeds we planted under its weights dug. A fist equivalent to a machete, as rifle, as beretta, as pistol, above a skull, it opens into a plume. From the world it hides all 5 fingers, can fit into a womb or a mouth. A man seated tied up with hemp rope, a strung up rooster eyes wide into the ivory. Names and coordinates, he confesses once I remove my fist. The rain stops, heat rises to 10. 2, grandmother. I cannot recall how early I knew or how it was shown to me as a girl in the parlor of my mother's living room, the piano, the mahogany floor smelling of a wet earth, fingers elongate to each personality, legs crossed in the schoolyard, my hands folded like gowns over my lap. Open, open, open. Old woman slices okras, tawny roots, a fish laid out glassy and gutted. I clutch meat and foliage, cutting with precision and speed. I cannot keep up my own fingers. I cannot help cutting into them. Yes, the fist. I can speak more on slicing. 3, granddaughter. It transforms into a comet when used right, curls to meet the invisible rendering, them quiet. They cannot fit into this mouth. I always try, but teeth get in the way. Because I've been called small, men have said my cavity is not equipped to protect me from such things. I've learned this first from my mother. That night, I dreamt of pummeling a man to paint. I brushed the ground with his own stain, with my fist. How to break his nose? I do, but without breaking my fist first. Then there's a gift above all gifts, this nautilus of skin. I can make love with it, talk into my endless self, with or without grief, through this portable cave. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Angela. It was so great to hear those newer poems and then also the poems from All Things Lose Thousands of Times. I know that we're seeing some questions pop up in the chat. I encourage everybody to keep asking more questions here on Zoom. So if you have one, put it in there and we'll try to get to whatever we can. I thought that I would maybe start us off just by asking about your approach to your new manuscript, because you did read from your book and then also the current manuscript that you're working on. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you are approaching that process of compiling a manuscript in either different or similar ways than your first book. I know that this will be something of interest to our MFA students because they also will be compiling a manuscript as part of their program here. So if you have any thoughts about that, or if you want to tell us just about your process so far and how it's going, I think we'd all be very interested.
Yeah, well, I could definitely see the importance of like knowing how manuscripts are put together. And um, in my experience, each collection or each manuscript has its own kind of spirit, has its own kind of personality. I kind of allow that to happen without sounding too abstract, but I like to believe that each manuscript does have that. And well, I guess on a more technical side, I like to lay out. I think this is a strategy that lots of writers do, right? Which is laying out the pages on the floor, on the wall, and sort of being a curator of. It's almost like being a curator of a museum. And I'm thinking of the poet Sally Wen Mao, who also gave me the idea of sort of the manuscript of like the museum, like hanging, what it might be like to sort of hang up, artwork on the walls of a gallery or museum, and sort of how to curate that, and how to curate that visuality. And I feel like the same is I think that's also really similar when it comes to curating text, right? And when you see your words sort of page by page sort of spread out in ways, what arrangement can do to that, and finding out what those linkages are from each piece to the next, but also like coming back to like the core or the cores of the manuscript, like going back to where it started from, and also being really sensitive and aware of how it's evolved and how it's also like hybridized, and I'm definitely one that is also really sensitive to those kind of messages. There are many moments that I've come from one, like kind of started at a particular point and then ended up somewhere else. And I really enjoy that. I think it speaks to one's a capability to notice change and to be really aware of the changes in the body and in the mind. And so, yeah, I would say that my first manuscript, or like, I would say All Things Lose was definitely compiled during grad school. So I had the attention and help and assistance of mentors and the community that comes with that. And so that was something I took advantage of for sure. And but when I got into the other projects, especially this particular manuscript, it's more, your time is more self-governed, and one has created and built and continues to build their literary community. And so like kind of gathering the people in your life that already are familiar with your work, that trust you, that you trust them, I think is essential. So that's something that I was part of my method with compiling the newest manuscript. And also I'm a fan of order, and I'm also not a fan of order, meaning that I really like to invite the a part of the creative process and of the arrangement process of the manuscript to be incredibly intuitive. And I like to listen to messages that I receive, not only from people, but from other forces outside myself. And I just keep myself really, really, really open to that. And again, not to sound too transparent, but I actually use like a lot of I create algorithms and formulas for myself that kind of can seem really random. It's almost like drawing cards and spreading out a tarot deck or whatnot. And that's how I rearrange a lot of my manuscript, that I just kind of try to exercise that muscle that's like, which I think is really intuitive, and also that other muscle that doesn't always function in the day-to-day, that functions in another realm or another parallel universe, that kind of muscle that has conversations, with the gods. And but and then by that I try to create other formulas for myself in that arrangement, and that's what I've been enjoying doing. So I kind of rambled on that one.
That sounds great. I mean, I feel like that is very, to just be open to inspiration and surprise and allow your poems to tell you where they want to go. Like that sounds, delightful and maybe difficult. But also like, I think it's really inspiring to try to help us to listen to our poems and be allowed to be surprised by them. I think is really cool to see how they rub up against each other. I think that we could go a couple different directions here. I am seeing a few questions in the chat about how you get the ideas for your writing. So I'm sort of combining a few questions. I'm going to make a monster question for you. So Constance was asking how much you write is based on true memories and how much is imagery in your mind. And then Jennifer was asking something similar about like in Women and Children for Sale. Is it a memory or is it like a span of years? Like, how do you think of the movement of time and the accumulation of images in your poems? Perhaps it's similar to how you design a manuscript, I don't know. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about how those things come into your poems.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think I think a lot of the ways in which I approach my work is probably in resistance of like maybe the novel, right? When we're thinking about writing the novel, there's this other kind of chronology that is present and that takes a lot of precedence. And for me, I have a tendency um, to really almost embrace like nonlinearity, and meaning that I don't, for me, like I don't find as much value in sort of the straightforward approach than I do with a kind of more either cyclical approach, or anything that's not, in sort of this singular sort of straight line. And so so that's already kind of my approach when I'm writing. So there's a lot of gathering that I'm gathering from many places. I think for me it's been more worthwhile to really reach out to various sources that are rooted in memory, but they're also rooted in imagination and reimagination, because I think that that's incredibly important, is to what that means, right? To reimagine memory. And also to think that, memory is not always the most reliable either. Um, you know, and yeah, the memory isn't the most reliable. Like sometimes we forget things, or sometimes the memory shifts and changes and and whatnot. And also I feel that I like to take from whatever current obsessions that I'm either researching or observing at the time, and whether it's theory or cultural media studies or visual art or music, and so I'm just really gathering from a plethora of spaces. I like to keep my sources really broad and diverse and multi-textured. I said this in I believe the craft talk. I like to keep myself like curious. I think it's like one of those things that give me some kind of motivation. It's what fuels my life force, is a kind of curiosity. So I'm also going beyond memory, and I'm also placing a lot of value in imagination, right? That I feel like imagination, and when I say imagination, I mean not only like dreams, but also like the memory of the body, right? That things are not always like visual, but things are also like somatic or corporal or whatnot. That this is all knowledge, this is all technology that's meant for us to kind of, or meant for me to kind of receive information from. So I'm always taking things from so many places. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it feels so inclusive, this idea of just like allowing as much in as possible. And I love this idea of imagination plus reimagination. It's like, I don't know, it's like you're revising imagination as you're thinking it through, or like allowing it to mutate and change. I think that's really exciting. Great. I think that we can maybe switch gears and talk a little bit about the form and some of the formal choices that you're making in your poem. So Sam, I'm looking at your question. Are you interested in asking it, or would you prefer I read it?
Oh, I can ask it. All right, thank you. So I'm just wondering if the poems in your collection, they take so many like different forms. That's very impressive. And I'm just wondering how, like, at what stage in the process, like, do you decide upon form and like line breaks and things like that? Does it happen? Like, do you have an idea going in what you want the poem to look like, or do you sort of like write the content first and then like get a feel for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sorry for that sound. That was my alarm going off. That's a really, really good question. Thanks for asking that. Let's see. Well, I definitely don't know what the poem is going to look like at first, other than my scribblings on the page or on the screen. And it's been helpful for me to build like a foundation, right? And I think that's what we're all doing as writers and as artists. We're building that foundation of various strategies or various techniques, like our toolbox, right? So sort of like having my toolbox ready and open, and as I approach a piece and I'm engaging with it and I'm revising it, there are moments perhaps I like to like have a conversation with it, whether it might mean just to read it out loud to myself a few times, and reading it out loud because I feel like incantations is a way to activate the poem, right? And another way to activate it through sound, you're kind of activating its musicality. And if so, that might get me into a place where then I can think about line breaks and stanza breaks or whatnot, or perhaps like abandon those abandon those structures altogether. So definitely reading them out loud a few times. I like to have like lots of questions with myself or conversation with myself in terms of like, again, like going back, like what is this piece about? What is it that I'm grappling with? What are the multiple things that it's like as far as in themes and motifs that are there. So I'm like constantly having conversations with my pieces. If I'm not having conversations with them, then I'm, you know, arguing with them or whatnot. I like to have like a really robust engagement with my work. And so because of that, then I'm able to pull out of my toolbox. And if I want to pull out a particular form, but perhaps it's whether, let's just say the sonnet form or what have you, and it's not really doing it for me, then I'm the kind of, I guess, writer who will gladly create a disobedient sonnet, um, and and see ways in which I can deconstruct that sonnet and or like take out the nuts and bolts and see what I have there or shorten it or whatnot. So I do look at things and see what I can deconstruct, see what I could tinker with. I like to create my own forms too, and I like to work with syllabics and just again musicality. So sometimes I might find a song that I might like and think of like listen to it and think about what that composition would be and see if can I transcribe it in this poem, and if there's even a relationship there, like if this is even a worthy like relationship that I should do, or is it just purely experimentation? So there's a lot of experimentation going on, there's a lot of revision, and it's really a lot of getting to know my work really intimately. It's sometimes, and a lot of times it's really not enjoyable, you know, um, but it's necessary to get the work done.
Great. Yeah. I like how you call your drafts sometimes pieces, or even when you were reading today, you were like, and then I'm going to read this piece and here is my next piece. And I'm curious, like if thinking of the poem as a piece, or like, you know, as something else that is not, maybe not yet a poem, or it could be something that becomes a multimedia or a different presentation, having this accumulation of pieces around you that you can work with, if that might be a way to invite in this kind of enthusiasm or this kind of like always generative something. I think that sounds, I don't know, it sounds very inviting to me. Cool. I want to move on to maybe Ariel's question about publishing. Ariel, do you want to say it, or would you rather I try?
I can say it. Why not? So do you have any recommendations for publishing the poems individually and as an entire book?
And do you, when you say recommendations, do you mean like specific journals or recommendations for specific journals, or do you mean like sort of different approaches or strategies to publication?
I guess all of the above now.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there's a lot of really great literary journals out there, and so it's hard to recommend like particular journals. There are journals that I do like to read, and they're also like I just also just love reading like zines and things like that. And and so I feel like, I mean, I think when publishing work individually, I think it's always good to know like the journal and kind of see the kind of work that they're publishing, see whatever submission description, or when they're having a like a call, some kind of call out or an open call for submission, see what those themes are. Definitely go for, I would, you know, suggest and recommend going for the journal that speaks to you, that whose aesthetics and sort of style speaks to you. Um, I mean, that's something that I look for when thinking about publishing work individually, but also just keeping, again, like casting, if as somebody, or sometimes I still feel like I'm like at a really early stage. But like there are moments I also like to cast my net really wide as well, and sort of be open to what other new journals or new literary publications come in. And that might be also like a really great platform to get in, like to get new work across, or to get experimental work across. As far as in publishing, like looking for ways to publish like the actual manuscript, I think it's really different, right? When it comes to like poets versus fiction writers or novelists or like hybrid writers. I think at this point right now, I still like love I still identify as a poet, but I feel like I more identify now as sort of like a hybrid, or a writer who writes the literary hybrid genre. And so if I was publishing that, or looking for, shopping my manuscript around, I would be looking for like publications that are like publishing similar work that I am working in. And so because you want that publisher to kind of champion you, right? And of course, you know, sometimes some folks are like agreeable to entering contests, and some are not agreeable, depending on where you stand politically or where you are financially. You know, I'm sort of still, I kind of am neutral when it comes to that. So I'm open to sort of do either or. But I think definitely exploring publications and literary journals is important. And a way I think doing that is, I mean, it's so hard now to go to like book fairs, but book fairs, you know, was a way in which that I explored other journals, and just picking up and buying and supporting independent publishers is also a really great way to explore that as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for being so frank about all of that too. I think that's really helpful. I would also recommend, because we do in fact have a library that works currently at Chapman University. You can always go to the library and check out, like, if there's a press that you're interested in, you can request something, borrow it, see what kind of stuff they're publishing, touch it. That's always really fun. I wanted to go to Anna's question, which was building on Ariel's question. I'm curious to know, she says, how you approach disseminating or publishing the textual poems and the multimedia work. How does that work differently for you? How do you know when something is finished and published, and where does it go?
Oh, wow. What? I I've I never I don't really know exactly. Like, there are just some pieces that I think that I've worked on multiple times, that I feel that are done, that I feel like have went through the rigor, right, of workshops and all of that, like multiple workshops and different writers that led these workshops, right? And then you pick and choose like the ways in which you want to revise it. But in terms of when it comes to multimedia work and what I choose to, like, I think your question is, how do I choose the pieces that will become sort of like more multimedia stuff.
I think I was asking both that, how you choose the pieces that become multimedia stuff, and also how do you get those out in the world differently than the usual poetry submission system?
Right. Well, this, to be honest with you, like the multimedia stuff is still, again, it's an ongoing project. It really started really with just a desire and enjoyment and collaboration with, with my collaborator at the time, who's still a collaborator. And we kind of just really, we just really enjoyed collaborating, and we kind of liked the same kind of music and sound. And, we started from there. And it was difficult to, it wasn't, I really didn't think about shopping it around or anything like that. I mean, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on these, it's like an ongoing thing. I'm still working on the soundtracks and the sound collages. I probably will continue to just accumulate quite a few. And I have published them before in literary journals, but what I've done with them mostly is I've presented them at conferences. I'm I'm a fan of panels and discussions that are multimedia and interdisciplinary. And so, and maybe it might be just because I'm not really good at presenting so formally during like panel discussions and whatnot, and I prefer that kind of engagement and performance. And so, like most of the, I would say the majority of the sound collages that I've done have been performed live at a conference, at a literary conference or something, or a reading. So it's public, and I'm out there with my laptop and speakers and whatever. And sometimes I'll show some video work. But I'm really open. I have really been open to various ways in presenting the multimedia stuff. So.
Great, thank you so much. We have one more question from Jennifer. Jennifer, are you interested in asking it yourself, or would you prefer that I read it for you?
I don't mind reading it. So going back to your work, I know we're pretty deep into publishing now, and your expertise is great to hear, for us early writers. But so going back to your poem, and in the book, All Things Lose Thousands of Times, words that stood out to me were yellow, fish bones, silver, gunny sack. And I love the connections you make with food and colors. But I was really curious about the gunny sack, and if there's any significance with gunny sack for you, or if it was just a common word. It just really stood out to me.
Wow. Thanks for saying that. That's so specific. I appreciate that. Yellow fishbone, silver gunny sack. Yeah. Well, I'm a pretty sensorial writer, and I like tapping into my five senses when I'm engaging with poems, when I'm or with prose or pieces, and also engaging with the creative writing process and also engaging with memory. So like there's a lot of, I guess, wrestling that I do when it comes to each of the lines and sort of the words that I use, the choices of words. So I try to get it as close to a particular state, and also a particular kind of perhaps like texture and rhythm. And so again, I'm like reading these words out loud a lot, or reading these pieces aloud, and that kind of propels me to kind of like change or revise particular words. So with yellow and fish bones and silver and gunny sack, it was probably me getting into a zone, getting into the zone, the landscape of the piece, and really trying to figure out like what that landscape is, to build that landscape. And I think gunny sack just felt I wanted something a little bit dangerous, right? And maybe a little bit dangerous, transient, nomadic. And for me, and I think for many people, like words have all these really interesting connotations. And I try to just pay attention to those connotations and kind of go from there. Yeah, and I remember that poem. I remember that piece, Gunny Sack, because I was writing about a greyhound, and so I was picturing. I was remembering. I'm writing from memory and also creating, reimagining memory. So there was a greyhound in the desert, that I was incredibly fascinated by, and who was, you know, very ravaged by the weather and the heat, and its body was like this. It was almost like this sack of flesh and bones. And so I was trying to get back into that landscape, into that memory, into the body of that greyhound. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Angela, for sharing your poetry and your experiences and all of your answers with us tonight. That was so nice. And thanks to all of you for being here with us on Zoom or on YouTube. We will see you back here for the rest of our fall Tabula Poetica Craft Talks and Readings. We'll be featuring Brent Armendinger on Monday, November 9th, and also our Chapman students on Monday, December 14th. So we'll see you back here in a few weeks. And in the meantime, have a great night.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions and all your support. I appreciate it. I had a really great time.